Hey guys, it's Zero here, and today I wanted to bring up what traits I look for and which ones I avoid when creating my early game and picking my duplicants. So going forward, let's start with the negative traits. So there's anemic, noodle arms, slow learner, gastrophobia, pacifist, squeamish, trypophobia, unconstructive, yokel, irritable bowel, small bladder, biohazardous, bottomless stomach, mouth breather, narcoleptic, loud sleeper, and flatulent. So the ones I would avoid at all costs are going to be loud sleeper and flatulent. Loud sleeper is going to affect 3 tiles away. So any duplicants that are within 3 tiles will get a debuff from interrupted sleep. So the issue with this, especially early game, is that you don't have quite a lot of room, and having to deal with giving enough space so you're not getting that debuff is too much to ask for, especially early game and almost at any stage in the game. Next up will be flatulent, where they're emitting natural gas, which it doesn't sound too bad because it's not too much of it. However, it does build up, and again, because of the small space that you're working with early game, that can cause a lot of issues when you're unable to filter it out. And it's tough to deal with extra gases in your base at any stage in the game. It's a little bit easier later on when you've got more filtration methods, but it's easier just to not deal with something like that. So I try to avoid those. Next up will be the caution list, including yokel, unconstructive, gastrophobia, trypophobia, mouth breather, and bottomless stomach. In this list, many of these you just don't want to run into the issue of having all 3 of your duplicants having the same issue of, let's say, yokel, where they can't do research or unable to dig. You can understand why that would cause kind of a game-breaking stop to you if you're unable to do research. Mouth breather isn't too bad. This one more affects early game. When you're dealing with oxygen, it's a little bit harder to generate it early game, or at least get started. And having someone that's taking a little bit more is usually not the best option. Bottomless stomach, that one's not too bad for late or mid game. Early game, again, you're just running into the issue of limited resources, and it's not a positive trait to really have on there. So looking at the positive traits, we've got twinkle toes, simple taste, foodie, buff, mole hands, grease monkey, quick learner, interior decorator, caregiver, early bird, night owl, uncultured, diver's lungs, iron gut, and germ resistant. For the most part, they're all fairly self-explanatory, but I would say the most positive out of the bunch are going to be mole hands, quick learner, diver's lungs, twinkle toes, and even early bird. So my favorite out of this list is diver's lungs. So that one's going to be the most helpful, especially early game, where oxygen levels are kind of limited to certain areas. So having that extra few seconds for them to be able to do that final task is extremely helpful. And early bird, seeing them get up and get started is also another good secondary one. The one I would say is not worth it is going to be night owl. This for me is just a personal preference, as any night owl characteristic in any game is not something that I choose. This was implemented in RimWorld and in this game, and I personally just don't ever choose characters that have that, as I don't like to work with that feature whatsoever. If you're a little bit more experienced, you could utilize this as, keep someone as a tinkerer overnight. That way you keep your refinery levels going while everyone else is sleeping. Keep that energy going through. So last up is going to be your stress reactions. The most destructive, and no pun intended, is going to be the destructive stress reaction. Now, the issue you run into this is you've already have the issue of them being stressed, and now they've become destructive. And chances are they're going to destroy something that's extremely useful to you, that either A, reduces stress already, or B, is just a vital part of your colony. And so, I've had numerous times where this has happened, and they're destroying the massage bed or something, and now they can't even de-stress themselves. I would argue, though, that if you're dealing with stress, there's a lot of underlying issues on how you're playing the game, as stress is probably one of the easiest things to avoid overall in the game, or at least to manage extremely well. But of course, the one I avoid at any cost, even no matter how well I do now, is generally going to be destructive, even though I really don't deal with stress that often. So sometimes I'm willing to compromise and take someone with that. But again, if you're starting off, I would not recommend that whatsoever. I would say the second worst is actually going to be Vomiter. And the reason for this is it's not terrible by itself, but the issue is that they create a puddle of vomit, of course. And anyone who steps through that will get a debuff of Soggy Feet. And that kind of makes it the second worst, as the other ones aren't as bad. So then you have Binge Eater, and this is something that's easily dealable with mid to late game, as everyone runs a fairly high calorie count. So this is something that you're able to deal with if you are dealing with stress, but are able to produce more than enough food. Last one is Ugly Crier, and this one's going to be the easiest. Again, as it says, it's just ugly crying. And compared to the rest where you're getting debuffs or things getting destroyed, this is one that you want to shoot for, especially if you're starting off. So again, that was just a kind of an overview of the traits that I personally look for. So I look not to have anyone with loud sleeping or flatulent, and especially early game, nothing with mouth breather or bottomless stomach. And then for my most positives, if I can find someone with diver's lungs, quick learner, mole hands, or twinkle toes, and even throwing in an early bird in there is usually my favorite. So I'll get a new video started soon, and this one I'm going to shoot to have maybe my first 40 to 50 days or even first 100 days cycle, and show you guys what I try to do. Thank you.